This episode of Life Excellence is going to be a little different. Instead of our usual format, we're revisiting my conversation with renowned pianist, composer, and entrepreneur Robert Emery. But this time, we're presenting it in a fresh, visually engaging way. We've reimagined the experience so you can connect with Robert's insights and stories on an entirely new level. We hope you enjoy this unique take on one of our most compelling conversations. Robert Emery is an award-winning conductor, pianist, arranger, composer, and producer who has built one of the most dynamic and diverse careers in music today. Robert began playing piano at the age of 7, made his London debut at just 13, and first stepped onto the conductor's podium at 17 with the Birmingham Philharmonic Orchestra. By age 23, he became the youngest conductor ever to work at the Sydney Opera House, and at 29, he conducted the National Symphony Orchestra of Uzbekistan with Andrea Bocelli as soloist. Robert has conducted many of the world's leading orchestras. His work spans everything from worldwide tours of film music such as The Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, and the music of John Williams, to collaborations with artists like Meat Loaf, Russell Watson, and Stewart Copeland. He is also an entrepreneur, educator, and the founder of multiple ventures designed to bring the power of music to wider audiences. He joins us today from his office just outside London, and it's an honor to have him on the show. Welcome, Robert, and thanks for joining us on Life Excellence.
Thanks, Brian. It's wonderful to be here.
Well, it's wonderful to have you. Robert, music became part of your life at a very early age, as I described. How did music first enter your life, and when did you realize it was something you were truly meant to do vocationally?
Like a lot of people my age, there was a sort of a family piano around, and it was my grandmother's, and it was passed to my mother, and so the piano was in the house. And over here in the UK, we used to have a program called Top of the Pops, and it was once a week. I remember it. I think it was on a Friday night, and it was the charts essentially live on TV. And you always waited as a family, you sat around the TV to go and see what was number one that week. And I used to listen to the songs, and I would then, for whatever reason, just go to the piano and just play what I heard. I hadn't had any lessons or any practice, and I just somehow was sort of born with an innate ability to be able to go and do that. And after about a year of doing that, my mum said, "Oh, I think you should probably get piano lessons." And I did some piano lessons with an elderly lady down the road. And after about a year, she said, "Like, I can't teach you anymore. You've gone past my ability as an elderly lady who teaches piano to local kids. You should go and find a professor of piano, a proper professor somewhere." And that's where I went to the Conservatoire in Birmingham, which is where I grew up. And it was just really quickly clear that music was going to be my life, my passion, my hobby. It's in my DNA, it's in my bones. I can't get away from it. It's not something I find difficult. It just comes naturally to me. And it's just a wonderful gift I've been given. And it's something that to this day, people ask, how do you compose music? How do you play music? How do you remember a 90-page Rachmaninoff piano concerto? And honestly, the answer is I'm not sure. It's just one of these things that I can do, and I'm lucky enough to be able to do it.
I have such a great appreciation of music, and you're actually the second child prodigy musician I've had on the show. One of the very first guests, this was 5 years ago, was a violinist named Fabiola Kim. And I remember her talking about her concert debut at the age of 7 and how much she loved that performance and still has vivid recollection of it. She said that after the performance, she walked off the stage, turned to her mother and said, "I want to do this for the rest of my life." Did you have a defining moment like that where you instantly knew music was your calling, or was it more a gradual realization over time?
Well, It's just always been there. I don't remember a time without it. I don't remember that sort of starting point where that was where I knew I wanted to become a musician. But there have been really odd things that have happened to me in life, which have reinforced the notion that I should be a musician. And one of them is I went to London when I was 15 years old. It was the first time I ever went to London. I grew up 120 miles away from London. And I went to see a show. I went to see a piece of theatre called Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat by Andrew Lloyd Webber.
Sure.
At the London Palladium. And I went to see that. And it was the first time I saw a musical, and I fell in love with it. And I knew there and then that's something I wanted to be involved with. And as a 15-year-old, I got the program that we purchased, and I circled the name of this guy called Mike Dixon, who was the musical director, and then a person below him was a guy called Mike Reed, who was the musical supervisor. I didn't know what the difference was. I just wrote in this program, this is what I want to do when I grow older. I still got that program today. Cut to a couple of years later, I moved to London to go to the Royal College of Music to study piano. And like any student, I needed money. So I went to the local church and got myself a job playing the organ. And the vicar, on the very first Sunday I was there, said, there's a guy I'd like you to meet who I think might be useful for your career. And in walked down the aisle this guy called Mike Dixon. And he was the guy who I circled. And I told him that, I said, I can't believe I'm actually meeting you. This is surreal. This is crazy. And then the next Sunday, the vicar said to me, there's somebody else who I think you should meet who might be useful to you. And down the aisle walked Mike Reed, the other guy I circled. And I was just thinking, whoa, this is crazy. And Mike Dixon was the first person who gave me a job in the West End. And Mike Reed really kick-started my career by introducing me to Russell Watson and Bocelli, and has since then become one of my closest mates, and actually is the godfather to my eldest son now. And it all started with me as a 15-year-old circling their names on a program. It doesn't matter if you believe in God, if you don't believe in God, if you believe in fate, I don't know. All I know is that it's a very strange world I live in, where I can circle these two people on a piece of paper, and then literally my first week in London as a music student, they appear in my life and have really been the acorn from where I've grown my career. And that is just an incredible thing, I think.
Well, that's a great story. And I'm a huge proponent of goal setting and writing down your goals. And I'm a man of faith, but I do believe whether you again, are believe in God or just love goal setting, the concept ends up being the same, where it's amazing to me that this exercise of just writing down your goals and how that puts into your subconscious these things that you want to create. And then lo and behold, these people show up or these opportunities present themselves. And it seems like that's happened actually time and time again with you. Not that you can write down the name of somebody you want to meet and that person pops into your life, but that's such a great story with not one, but two of the men that you circled in your program.
It's crazy, isn't it? And it's not the only time it's happened. And I think, we live in a world which is very unsettled. We live in a society where there's lots of challenges. And I think it's very easy to forget about the magic of this earth and the magic that humans can bring to it. And I think these nice little stories act as a great reminder that fundamentally humans are wonderful to each other, and that the world is an amazing place. And every time I say that story, I still can't quite believe it myself, but I'm incredibly lucky.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that story, Robert. So you were studying music and performing as a pianist in your early childhood years and then into your teens. And at just 17, you had the opportunity to conduct the Birmingham Philharmonic Orchestra. How did that opportunity come about? And what do you remember about that first experience stepping onto the conductor's podium at such a young age?
Oh, well, that's an easy one. The reason why that happened is because I needed money. um, the great thing about being a kid is that if you've grown up in a family which is a loving, supporting household, you should be oozing confidence and be able to try things and not be scared to fail. And I'm lucky that that was my situation. And when I got my place at the Royal College, there were 4 pianists in my year from around the world. They auditioned, and I was lucky enough to be one of them. I needed money to move to London, and I don't come from a wealthy background. My parents basically said, "We have no money to give to you. You're going to need £30,000 a year, and you've got to go and find it from somewhere." And I just thought, you know what? I've got 2 choices here. I can go and work in a bar or something, or in a restaurant, earning money. Nothing wrong with that. But I thought, if I can earn money doing the job I love doing, then that's going to be a better solution for me. So I figured out, if I was a producer of a concert, or in fact a week's worth of concerts, and also the artist on stage, then I would get like a double fee. And so I called the Birmingham Philharmonic Orchestra up, and I just said, "Look, I've not conducted before. Can I hire you for a week to do a week's long series of events? And I'm raising money to get me to the Royal College." And they said, "Yes, yeah, fine, we'll do that." And I said, "How much are you going to charge?" And they said, "Well, we have to have a conversation about it." So I said, "Is there any chance that you don't charge, and that you support me?" And they came back saying, "Yeah, fine, we won't charge you anything." And so I got into a rehearsal room with them. Never conducted before in my life. I'd had no lessons. I just thought, how hard can it be waving a piece of wood around? And away I went. And I earned enough money from that week's worth of concerts to last me 4 years worth of music college. Wow. And I didn't need to work again at all over that period, and I could just focus on my studies. And it was all down to the fact that I needed cash.
So what I've heard so far is that if you write down your goals, circle the names of people you want to meet, and then just ask what you want, then life falls into place.
Yeah, I think you've got to believe it. And I think there's an element where you've got to know it will happen. You see lots of adverts and people talking about manifestation and talking about, I'm going to write down on a piece of paper, I want $1 million tomorrow. It's not going to come. It's as simple as that. You've got to have a plan. You've got to have a plan that makes sense. And my plan was, I know I can make money doing the job I love. I think I'm good enough to be able to command decent fees and do it. And what is the plan for me to do this? And as part of that sort of strategic plan, is thinking about, who do you want to be like? Who do you want to talk to? Who do you want in your network? I find in general, people are very generous. If you are sincere and you have clear goals and a clear want and a clear wish, people are really generous with their time and their help and the energy that they give you. And I think that the most important thing is that you remember that and give it back. And so all of those elements combined, I think, can be an incredibly powerful thing for us humans. And it doesn't matter if it's music or if you, want to design furniture or you want to be a doctor. I think fundamentally it's all the same. You have to figure out what you want out of this life. You have to make a plan to get that. And then you have to believe and trust that it will happen and is happening. And then the magic of the world hopefully does its thing.
I know that you're a very intentional person. That comes across in our conversation. It came across in preparing for the show. And so that intentionality, that determination, and I also know that you work very hard because you're involved in lots of different things, and we'll talk about a few of them. And so it doesn't just happen. You're right. It happens with the plan that you talked about. But even before that, it happens with just making the decision and being determined and being intentional about the life that you want to create, or at least the direction that you want to go in. And that, coupled with some opportunities that present themselves, have turned out pretty well for you, I think.
Yeah, completely. And I think a strong element is just saying very few things in this life are impossible. They might be difficult, but not impossible. So you have to figure out how to do them. I remember saying to my mum when I was 20 years old, I want to buy my first house in London. And everybody laughed and said, well, as a 20-year-old, you can't buy a house in London. It's one of the most expensive places of real estate in the world. I just said, yeah, but that's what I want to do. And then furthermore to that, every single time I buy a house, I want to double the value of that house. So if I buy a house for 200,000, the next house I buy, I want to buy it for 400,000, and the next house 800,000. And everybody said, well, that's really, really challenging. I said, yeah, sure, but it's not impossible. I just got to find a way to do it. And when you look at your mindset like that, I think it's perfectly possible to do these things. And lo and behold, 8 months later, I bought my house in London and sold it 4 years later for 4 times the amount I purchased it for. So, I was really lucky on my timing there. But again, it's about having that goal, having that mindset right, and just having that faith and belief that it's going to happen.
That's very well said, and I appreciate you sharing that. After that first experience conducting when you were 17, additional opportunities quickly followed to conduct. And over time, at least for in that stage of your career, your focus seemed to shift from performing at the piano to leading from the podium. What was it about conducting that captured you so deeply? I know it came about because you just needed to earn some money, but obviously that shifted for you. And what caused that shift and actually caused your career direction to change, at least for a time?
Well, this is a great example of knowing that just because you want something doesn't mean it's going to happen, or just because you put that $1 million cash on a piece of paper, it doesn't appear. And it's about knowing, it's just about being smart and knowing what is possible and what's not. And as I was being a piano student at the Royal College, and I didn't do any conducting there at all, I just began to realize that to be a concert pianist, which was always my dream as a kid, and tour around the world playing piano, is challenging. There are probably 20 people in the world who are earning a decent living from that. And I just realized I wasn't good enough for that. If I'm being completely blunt, I was really very good, but would I be one of the top 20 players in the world? No, I wouldn't. And what's more, I didn't have the fire to get to that point in my belly. It wasn't there. I just knew I loved making music, and I realized that as a pianist moving over into conducting, it's a really useful thing, because lots of conductors play piano, and for various reasons it makes your job just a lot easier, and that you have a better understanding of harmony. You can do arrangements easier and orchestrations and composition and all of that sort of stuff. Whereas if you're an oboe player or clarinet player, your sense of understanding how music is put together is probably a little bit more limited. So I just realized moving over to the conducting side, there are lots more opportunities to make music in different styles. And for me, variety is the spice of life. I never just wanted to play Beethoven. That would make me very bored. I love Beethoven, but there's a little pocket of Beethoven here that I love, but there's lots of little pockets of other composers, other styles of music, which is why I ended up working with people like Meat Loaf and Stewart Copeland, because they're about as far away from Beethoven as you can get. But from what they do, Meat is now dead, bless him, but they were the best in the world at what they did. And so being able to suddenly go and play rock opera music with Meat Loaf and work with him getting the stage show up and running and working in theatre conducting enables me to do all of these different things, whereas piano playing is just piano playing. And so I just figured out I'm not good enough. I don't have the fire, and I want more variety. And again, it's that understanding the intention, and then saying, that's what I'm going to do. End of. Do it.
You've had some amazing opportunities as a conductor. At 23 years old, you became the youngest conductor ever to, I don't know if this is still the case, but it certainly was at the time, the youngest conductor ever to perform at the world famous Sydney Opera House. I haven't been there, but just in photos, it's spectacular. I can't imagine what it's like even to see it from the outside in person, let alone be on the podium conducting an orchestra there. Looking back, what does that accomplishment mean to you today?
Well, I remember that concert very well, mainly because I had an accident. So on the back of a podium that you stand on, there's usually a safety rail to make sure that when you're facing the orchestra, you don't step backwards off the podium. And for whatever reason, as a youngster, I always asked them to remove it. I said it made me feel like I'm sort of imprisoned, and I don't need it. I want it gone. And they removed it for the rehearsal, and then they put it back for the concert. And I used to do this thing where I would run on stage and not just walk. So an energetic young. So I always want to be a bit different. So I would run on stage, take a bow. I turned around, and with my right hand, to start a piece of music with an orchestra, you have to do what's called an upbeat, which is literally just raising your arm and go. And I did the mother of all upbeats, throwing my arm up into the air. And I didn't realize that they put the safety barrier back on. And I wrapped my hand around this piece of metal. The baton flew out of my hand into the orchestra and hit a cello player, and I went bam, and the orchestra started. My hand went bright red and swelled up, and I had to conduct the whole of the concert with my left hand. It's the one and only time it's ever happened. It's the one and only time I've ever performed at Sydney Opera House to this date. And I remember it like it was yesterday, mainly because of that. But that's just part of the fun of being in show business. All these crazy things happen to you. You just never know. You never know what's going to happen when it's live entertainment on the stage.
So you showed up with a bang, literally.
Literally, yeah, exactly. I mean, I remember as well, like, I was wearing a long tie instead of a sort of a dicky bow. I was wearing a long tie for a different concert. And I remember not feeling energetic. And I was just feeling like, I'm not sure I can be bothered to do this really, which is a bit of a nasty thing to say when you've got an audience of 2,000 people who have bought tickets and they're ready and waiting. And I was younger, I was inexperienced, I was a bit stressed. And I remember the promoter was sitting at the side of the stage with me, and he looked at me and he said, "You need some energy, boy." I said, "Yeah, I do." And he got a pair of scissors from the desk next to him, and he cut my tie. And this was 30, 40 seconds before I was due to go on stage. He just went snip. And of course, everybody went into panic. What do you do? Oh my God, this is crazy. And there was a guy over there who had got a tie on, and he's wearing a suit. And I literally ran over to him and said, "Give me a tie, take off your tie, please, please, please." And, quickly put this new tie on and walked on stage with about 3 seconds to spare. And oh my word, if you ever need an injection of energy when you're about to go on stage, get somebody to destroy the clothing you're wearing. And that soon gives you the endorphins to get on that stage. It's a crazy, crazy job I do, but it's amazing.
Not quite the way you want to be energized, but
well, it worked.
I guess it worked. Robert, you've had the opportunity to perform. We talked about the Sydney Opera House, but at some of the most iconic venues in the world. Is there one place that stands out above the others, either because of its history or the energy in the room, or simply because it felt amazing or maybe even surreal to realize that you were actually there?
Yeah, the Royal Albert Hall in London. I think it's one of the most iconic concert halls in the world, and it's it was a hall that I'd been in. It's directly opposite the Royal College of Music. So you come out of the Royal College of Music at exit, and you see the Royal Albert Hall there opposite you. And as a student, I always looked at it every single day and thought, one day I'm going to be performing in there. And the first time I did, when I walked out onto that stage in this massive 6,500 seat auditorium and looked around, and I just thought, somebody's looking down on me. Thank you. Because this is a dream come true. And, from an acoustic point of view, the venue is rubbish. But from a nostalgic, emotional feeling point of view, when you go on that stage and you've got the audience in the round around you, it's just, there's no other venue like it in the world. It's just incredible.
I'm quickly developing this list of concert halls that I need to visit. So we're up to 2 now. Don't make the list too long. It'll be challenging to get to all of them. But actually saw a concert on television there, and it was spectacular just watching it on television. So again, I can't imagine what it's like to be there, either to perform or even to see a concert or production there. Robert, I read that the British newspaper, The Times, once called you the eccentric, barefooted maestro. Is that a fair description of you? And how did that nickname come about?
Yeah, eccentric is 100% right. I never want to be the norm. It's just not my personality. I don't want to be status quo. I want to be something different, something challenging. Sometimes I get it right, sometimes I get it wrong, but that's okay. And I always rehearse barefoot. Take off my shoes, take off my socks, we rehearse barefoot, because I can be standing on the podium for 6 or 9 hours in a day rehearsing. I just want to be super comfortable. And I was doing a concert in 2011 in Switzerland, and I was about to go on stage, and the band who I was going on stage with an orchestra and the promoter were at the side of stage. And he looked down and he said, "Why are you wearing shoes?" And I looked at him and I thought, that's one of the most odd questions anybody's ever asked me. I said, "Well, because I'm about to go on stage, why would I not wear shoes?" He said, "But you always rehearse barefoot." I said, "Yeah, sure, because that's where I'm most comfortable." He said, "So take off the shoes, take off the socks, go on stage barefoot." I was like, "Seriously?" He said, "Yeah." So I did that. I thought it was a bit of a quirky, eccentric thing to do. And there was a newspaper there, and they took a photo of my foot on the podium, and it was on the front page of the Zurich Zeitung, the national newspaper, the next day. Barefooted Conductor comes to Basel. And and ever since then, it's been a thing that I used to do. I don't do it so much anymore. I'll happily do it if a promoter specifically requests it. But as a 20-something-year-old trying to make my name in a business, I thought, hey, this is a cool, quirky, unusual USP that I can bring to a concert that nobody else does. Sometimes I have contracted that I have to wear shoes on stage, in which case I absolutely do. I have no issue with that. Other times, the promoters specifically request me to go barefoot, in which case I do. So it's a fun little thing.
You mentioned this concept of being different, and you also said USP, unique selling proposition, which is something that distinguishes you from everyone else. Share a little more about that and the importance of being different, and maybe the necessity of being different in the world today, not just in music, performing or conducting, but regardless of one's chosen profession.
I think having a USP is an incredibly important thing in this world. And it actually doesn't matter what profession you're in. It doesn't matter if you want to be a doctor or a dentist or a table maker or a musician or a lawyer. I think everybody has to have a USP of some sort. It has to be innate and with you. You can't kind of fake it. It just has to be part of your thing, and you have to figure out what that is. If you kind of look back in the history books at almost anybody that is still remembered and talked about, right from Edison through to somebody like James Dyson, who invented the bagless vacuum cleaner, through to somebody like Ford, who made the motor car more easily accessible, common, and affordable. They all had their USB. I mean, James Dyson's USB was, I don't want to make money out of selling these silly Hoover bags that everybody has to buy and refill and then throw away. I want to find a way of doing this without that, and I'm going to have this bagless technology. And then he went and did the same with fans, a fan without a blade, and that was his USP. Everybody has to, or everybody you can think of, including all major artists on stage, whether it's Beyonce or somebody like Meat Loaf, they all have their USP. And so I think we all have to find what makes us unique, what makes us special, what makes us different, and really lean into that and follow it. And use it. Don't be ashamed or scared to use it, because you given this life, you may as well max it out as much as you can.
How do we develop that or discover or identify that? You mentioned that it's not something that we can manufacture. It's something that's inherent in us. And so it's just figuring out what that differentiator is and then maximizing that in whatever way is appropriate.
Yeah, I think part of it is about knowing yourself really well. And that seems like a slightly odd thing to say, I guess, but I think there are a lot of people in this world who don't necessarily know themselves because maybe they shy away from themselves. So I think a lot of that is about knowing yourself really well. And then it has to be about your personality as well. You know, my personality is quite vivacious, outgoing. I'm very comfortable and happy being on stage, talking on stage to 25,000 people in an auditorium. That's absolutely fine by me. And that's my comfort zone, and I enjoy it. So I think knowing yourself really well, knowing what you're good at, and then finding out how you can do what you're good at a little differently from what everybody else is doing, is a great thing. I mean, if you think about that, there's that television program called House. I think it was huge in the States as well as over here. And it's all about that doctor in the hospital who would find unusual ways of diagnosing issues, or he would have unusual illnesses that nobody else could figure out, and he had to find a way to be able to diagnose and treat them. That was his USP. So that's a great example. I mean, I know it's only a made-up television series, but that's a great example of how even a doctor who has rules and regulations coming out of his ears of what he needs to do, even that person can find a USP in their life.
Well, and you've certainly been able to do that as a conductor and other ways in the musical genre. I was a musician growing up and performed in concert and jazz bands and also in a community wind ensemble. And I've always felt that conducting is leadership in its purest form. It's bringing together a group of highly skilled individuals, sometimes not so highly skilled, I guess, but in your case, definitely highly skilled, and aligning them around a shared vision, communicating with the wave of a baton and your hand, and a combination of your hands and a baton, I guess, and inspiring them to perform at their very best. Robert, what are the biggest leadership lessons you've learned from the podium?
That is a great question. So I've gone through stages. I mean, this is the other thing I think we should all remember. Who we are today is not who we are going to be tomorrow. And we always change. We always evolve and develop, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. And when I was younger, and I was starting out, I had a real issue with conducting, not physically conducting, but the idea that a 24-year-old can be on the podium telling musicians who maybe have been a professional musician for 50 years what to do. It was a real issue. The players in the orchestra didn't respect me. I didn't respect them. and in truth, I found it very challenging. And my only way to deal with it back then was to be super confident, super dictatorial, and really crystal clear that my way is the way, and it is only the way that we are going to do things. And it was the way that I dealt with it. I'm now a very different person on that podium. I'm now a person who is much more in tune with the other humans that are sitting in front of me, with what they need, what they don't need. I now fully understand that they are the specialists in their instrument. I can't tell them how to play their instrument better than they can play their instrument. I can say that what I'm hearing isn't working for me, and there has to be one person who fundamentally is in charge of the sound that comes out of an orchestra, and that would be me as a conductor. But nevertheless, it's an understanding of the players in front of me have decades of experience, sometimes more than me, and to respect that and to love that and use it. And I'm now not scared to ask players of the orchestra, that's not sounding right to me. I don't, how you're playing that doesn't work for me. Do you have any other ideas? Is there anything else you can do which might give a different sound? And actually give the people in front of me the trust to do what they need to do. And so I've kind of done a 180-degree turn on how I now work on stage. I'm not dictatorial at all. But I could say, well, in hindsight, I wish I was like that when I was younger. I kind of don't, actually, because I've got to today where I am because of the journey I've gone through. If I was like how I am now in my 20s, I don't think I would be a confident and as at peace working as a conductor that I am now. So it's all about a journey. It's all about an understanding of how do you communicate with fellow humans around you, and how do you give them information in a successful way. And I think the big lesson above everything else is trust. You have to very clearly put your trust in other people, and 9 times out of 10 they will reward you handsomely for that trust. And I used to not trust anybody else but myself, and now I do the opposite. I trust in myself that I trust others. And I think that's a key thing in life, Brian, because I'm rambling a bit, but I firmly believe this is a really important point to make. A great example, I stay in lots of hotels. I'm touring 6-9 months of the year. So I'm living in hotels 6 or 9 months of the year. I was in a hotel just last week, and my charger for my iPhone and my MacBook Pro laptop blew up. And it was about midnight, and I had a meeting the next morning at 8 a.m. in a place I didn't know how to get to, and I knew I needed my devices charged. I went down to the lobby and I said, I'm so sorry this has happened. Do you by any chance have a spare charger that I can use? And the person at the hotel desk said, sorry, sir, we don't. And I looked at this person directly in the eye and I said, this is the reason why I need this charger. I'm going to trust you that you're going to find a solution for me. And I walked off. I said, I'm going to wait up for the next couple of hours. I'll be in my room. And about an hour later, 1 a.m., the person who I was speaking to downstairs came and gave me a charger and said he'd phoned a friend who was still up and about. His friend had a charger in his car and dropped it off at the hotel to him. He brought it to me. He said, just if you can kindly give it back when you leave the hotel so I can give it back to my friend, that would be great. And that only happened because I said very clearly, I'm putting my trust that you are going to be able to help me here. I don't doubt it in the slightest that you're going to find a solution. And that trust and that responsibility then transfers to the other person. And in general, people don't want to let other people down. And he moved heaven and earth to find me an iPhone charger. And I think that's a really great management leadership skill that you can use across the board. Doesn't matter what industry you're in. Fundamentally, you're working with humans. Amen to that.
Well, and it's not just a great management tool or leadership tool. It's a great human tool, right? It's a great way to operate. If we can start from the place or get to a place of trust, mutual trust, mutual respect, then that's a pretty good starting point for whatever we want to accomplish. Robert, one of the things that really stands out to me, and especially as I was preparing for the conversation and in our conversation today, was the incredible range of collaborations that you've had throughout your career. And you talked about them, from working with Stewart Copeland, legendary drummer for the Police, to collaborating with Meat Loaf, to touring for years with UK's most prolific classical recording artist ever, Russell Watson. How do opportunities like these come together? And I guess I know maybe you wrote them down or somehow manifested them. I'm kidding a little bit, but how did those opportunities happen? Because they're so outside the sort of the typical genre of the world that you were operating in. And what do you enjoy most about moving between such musical worlds? You did say that you'd get bored if you were only playing or conducting Beethoven, so maybe that's part of it, but I'm guessing there's more.
Yeah, I have said that life would be very boring if I had to stick with one genre. But I think my career is such that it naturally has an ebb and flow to it. So there might be a year where I'm in the music studio in Abbey Road, for instance, recording on a weekly basis, producing albums. And then the following year, I might only appear in Abbey Road once because I'm away on tour. And then the following year, I might spend 6 months of my year composing a musical. And then the next 6 months might be just arranging other music for concerts. It naturally ebbs and flows. And I try not to manage that. I just try to have faith that the phone will keep ringing. I'll still keep on getting inquiries and invitations to go and perform. And so far, that has never let me down. And so why change a pattern that is working so unbelievably well? And in terms of how do I source work, well, in this industry, you're only as good as your last gig. And if you do a really bad job somewhere, people will find out about it very quickly. So I make sure that I can always do it as best as I possibly can. And it doesn't matter if it's a concert for 200 people or a concert for 20,000 people. I'll put in the same level of energy and effort and time and passion. And people talk. People talk, and they talk for better or for worse. And hopefully people talk about me because they like the work that I've done, and the information gets around, and I just get phone calls. That's just how the industry works, really.
You stated that you want to do the best you can, and that positions you as much as you have control over for opportunities to present themselves. I call that life excellence. And as you know, our show is called Life Excellence. Robert, you've pursued excellence across so many areas of your career, and you've worked alongside some of the most famous and talented musicians in the world. And I wonder, what does excellence mean to you?
Excellence to me, well, I think it's got two meanings. It's got an internal meaning for yourself and an external meaning for what you see others doing. So excellence to me, for an internal, i.e. a self-reflection, to me feels like I can be proud and stand up and say, I could not have done that any better. I worked hard enough. I put enough energy and passion into whatever it was I was doing, and to turn around and say, I could not have done any better. Maybe other people could have done better than me, but that's not my problem. That's not my job, because I am me. I'm the only person who can do what I do from my side. So I can't worry about if somebody else can do my job better than me. I can only do what I can do as best as I can. So that's self-excellence. Then I think when you're talking about excellence of other people, it is very tempting to say they weren't very good. For instance, if you go and see a singer perform and you go, well, I didn't like them. I thought they had a rubbish voice. They weren't very good. But clearly somebody likes them. Otherwise, they wouldn't be there. So then the same rule, and it's very difficult when you're reflecting on other people. Ideally, the same rule applies, saying, do you think that person did the best they could? And maybe we got a great English phrase. I don't know if you use it. It's not my cup of tea. Is what we say. It's a very British thing to say. Maybe you say, well, that singer is not my cup of tea. And ideally, you would give people the benefit of the doubt and just realize that maybe you didn't like them, but just because they're not your thing. Art is a very subjective thing in this world. And what I love, you might not love. And that's okay. It doesn't mean to say that the person that that we're both watching might be terrible. So I think excellence is all about how much passion, how hard did somebody work to achieve what they achieved, not necessarily the standard that they achieved it to.
I love that thoughtful answer, and I really appreciate the distinction between internal and external definitions of excellence. Thank you for that. You're involved in so many fascinating projects. I think we could probably do another show and still not fully discuss all of them. But one I especially wanted to ask about is orchestral meditations. And you mentioned Abbey Road Studios. This is your symphonic meditation music recorded at the world famous, of course, Abbey Road Studios with your own National Philharmonic Orchestra of Great Britain. Where did the idea for that project come from?
COVID. It was one of the only good things to come out of COVID, I think. As a conductor, everybody said, you have to go and work from home. That does not work as a conductor because I can't sit in my kitchen waving a stick around, hoping that somebody somewhere in the world is going to start making music. It doesn't work as a concept. So it all basically stopped for me for 2 years. I didn't earn a penny for 2 years working. And I realized that meditation is a very powerful thing. Meditation, some people confuse meditation with being religious or woo-woo. Meditation can be as simple as just sitting in a bit of silence, just having thoughts and just doing a bit of self-reflection. It can be many things to different people. But a lot of people like using music to meditate. And I did some research, and all the music that was online was all recorded digitally. It was all, somebody programming some strings or playing it in on a keyboard. And there was hardly any live meditation music out there. And I thought, wouldn't it be a crazy idea if we went into Abbey Road Studios with a 96-piece symphony orchestra and a 45-piece choir? And we not only recorded their instruments, but we also put a microphone on them so we can record their breath and their breathing as well. And so we did this as a bit of an experiment, a very expensive experiment, but nevertheless, it was an interesting one. And we recorded 15 pieces of meditation music. And then I sat on this music on my computer for a year, not doing anything with it. And my colleague and best friend who I was doing this with, a Swiss guy called Moritz Schneider, he said, have you done anything with this music? I said, no, I haven't had time. He said, you have to. The world is calling out for something like this. There is no other meditation music in the world that has been recorded with a full symphony orchestra. And so I set up orchestralmeditations.com. We released it, and I didn't really market it or PR it. People kind of naturally found it. The whole thing is recorded in 3D binaural audio, so when you put on your headphones, it sounds like the symphony orchestra is really around you. And ever since then, the number of people who are writing to me just saying your music has changed my life is really astonishing. And I never thought it would have such a large effect on people, but it does. And I think it's a wonderful thing. So it's just a project now which is ongoing, and every so often we go back into Abbey Road with the orchestra, with the National Philharmonic, and record more music and release it. And it's just such a special thing that came out of COVID. And if it wasn't for COVID, I would never have done it. It just would never have been a thing in my psyche to do. So it was a side project that's turned into quite a major project over the years. And everything is recorded with relevant frequencies. Like there are certain frequencies that do certain things. So 528 hertz is a solfeggio frequency that helps with things like DNA repair, for instance. So we find out what 528 hertz is in terms of a note, and then we find out what relevant instruments can play that note, and then we get that note droning out. So all of these frequencies are sort of pre-built within the music, and it just took off like crazy, and it's just a wonderful thing.
Well, the first thing that stood out for me as I was learning about it was what a monumental undertaking it was. And my background's in finance. And so I was thinking, what an expensive way to produce meditation music, especially with the relative ease of digital music production. But then I listened to the meditations, and I listened to several tracks, not all of them, but they're absolutely amazing. I didn't listen to them with headphones, but we talked about intentionality earlier. You were obviously very intentional. This was a huge undertaking, huge time investment, energy investment, financial investment. And yet I'm so happy that you did it, and really congratulate you on your success, which I'm gathering that these meditations are being used both by individuals and also commercially.
Yep, exactly. And it was never done for the money. It was done because we felt like it was needed in some way, shape, or form. I thought I could use some meditation music now, and all of the music I'm hearing, I don't like. And so, there was no expense spared. It was not done to try and earn money. And actually, any funds that we generate from it either are plowed back into future projects or pay off the old ones, because it is incredibly expensive to produce this stuff. The thing I like about it is it doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter if you're in Japan, Minnesota, Birmingham. It doesn't matter where you are. You can access this music and get the benefits from it. And I think that's a really healthy thing in life.
And if all that isn't enough, you also created the Emery Foundation to inspire children to explore orchestral instruments. And as part of that endeavor, you created TED's List, which is the world's largest musical advice community. What's the origin of all that? And why is the mission of your foundation educating children, but really anybody wanting to learn about musical instruments? Why is that so important to you?
So that was also a COVID project.
You were very busy during COVID, Robert.
Yeah, I had a lot of time. It was supposed to be a tiny thing. I thought I would generate maybe a 10-page website with some helpful tips and advice on musical instruments. And what I realized is I was getting so many emails from orchestral players saying, freelance orchestral players saying they had no money, they had no work. Could I give them any work? And I thought, this is crazy. Why don't I try and do some sort of fundraising campaign to raise funds for TED's List, the music education website, and then I can pay the professional musicians who are currently out of work because of COVID, I can pay them a fee to write world-class advice on how to tune your violin, how to put your clarinet together, what is a capo for a guitar, etc., etc., etc. And we found some of the world's best players on almost all of these instruments. They were doing nothing with their time because they couldn't work. And so they wrote these amazing articles for us. And now the website is nearly 1,000 pages. It just turned into this kind of behemoth project where at its heyday, we had 28 people, 28 full-time members of staff working on it. And it just, again, it took off. It went crazy. It wasn't my intention. I just thought it was a 10-page little website, but it went crazy. And it's all because music education, certainly in this country, is now shockingly bad. When I was young and in school as a 5, 6, 7 year old, I remember this thing called the duvet of music, which is what I called it, which is like music is wrapped around you. It's everywhere. It was in assemblies. We had it 3 or 4 times a week. You could play a musical instrument. You sang in the choir. There was a school orchestra that everybody played in. It didn't matter if it was the triangle or the piano or a violin. Everybody was part of that, and everybody fostered this love of music because of that. And some people then went on to make, to go and play a musical instrument as a hobby. Some people then went on to do that as a profession. Other people just learned a love of music. And that whole music education scene now, it's certainly in this country, has just disappeared. And it's pathetically bad. And if I now go to a school and say to an 8-year-old, what's a bassoon or a tuba or a trombone or a cello, 9 out of 10 kids wouldn't know. And I think that's a real sorry state of affairs. So I set up the Emery Foundation as a way to try and see if in any way, shape or form I could help out and change that little by little. And Ted's List was the tool for me to do that.
I think it's great that you're doing that. I also think it's very unfortunate the state of music education in the schools today. And another thing that's really fallen by the wayside is physical education. And we see the effects of that certainly in our country, and I expect in your country as well. For our listeners and viewers, we'll be sure and include a link to the orchestral meditation site, the Ted's List site, as well as your main website, robertemery.com. Robert, when you look at everything you're involved in, it's remarkable that you've built a career not only as an accomplished conductor and musician, but also as a highly successful entrepreneur. How have those two worlds influenced each other? And I wonder, and this is with my business background, do you see yourself as more of an artist who became a businessman, or a businessman with an artist's mind?
Look, I think it's really simple. As a freelance musician, you are your business. And you tend to find the freelance musicians who fail in their career, they fail not because they're not talented, because some of these people have uber amounts of talent. They fail because they don't recognize the fact that they are their own business. And that's one blessing I learned from a very, very young age. I don't know how or why, but I just figured out, right from when I was 17 and I called the Birmingham Philharmonic Orchestra up and I said, can I use you free of charge? I knew there and then that me, Robert Emery, as a musician, I am a business. And I have to function as a business and think as a business. And then when I'm on a stage or making music or in Abbey Road or composing, I then put that business side away, because at that point I'm a musician. But the two go hand in hand. Somebody like Ed Sheeran, who is one of the world's most successful artists at the moment, he's also one of the world's most successful businessmen. Nobody ever thinks about that side. But to run an operation and a tour like he does with the team around him, it's massive. He'll have 20, 30, 40 people looking after his career. And these people are businessmen, the business people. Every musician, unless you've got a paid job in an orchestra and you take home your salary and you think nothing more of it, if you're a freelancer, you're a business person. End of story. And if you don't recognize that and don't deal with it, you don't have a career. It's as simple as that. And I was lucky enough to realize that really early on. You can't have one without the other.
And you've certainly done a great job with both. Robert, thanks so much for joining us. It's been wonderful to meet you and spend time with you. And I appreciate all the great insights that you've shared with our audience today.
My pleasure. Thank you, Brian. I've absolutely loved the conversation. And what a great podcast you've got. Keep it going.
I appreciate you saying that. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Life Excellence. Please support the show by subscribing, sharing it with others, posting about today's show with Robert Emery on social media, and leaving a rating and review. You can also learn more about me at brianbartes.com. Until next time, dream big dreams and make each day your masterpiece.